In chapter 19, verses 1 through 4, Scripture says this: "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world." And so we have in this passage a reminder that all of creation, everything that we see, gives honor and praise and proclaims the greatness and the majesty and the wonder of God. We find in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, where it says, "For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him." And so we find in the Scriptures that all throughout the Scriptures we find this consistent narrative that the reality of all of creation is not about us. While we are a part of creation, while we get to enjoy creation, while we get to experience creation, and the reality is that it's all really about God. And rather than pointing to how immense we are and how important we are, the universe really declares, and the expanse of the universe really declares how amazingly big our God is. Because if we've got a God who all he can do is create a little bitty world, which is a pretty big deal if you think about it, and he can create people, I mean, that's a pretty important task. And he can make a moon, and he can make a sun, and he can maybe craft a couple of other cool little stars and planets, and that's an impressive God. But when you've got a God who can create a space that is tens of billions of light years across. In other words, if you're traveling at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, it would take you tens of billions of years to get across the universe. If we've got a God who can create all of that, then maybe the image that we need to grab a hold of is this God is much bigger than we think he is. I don't know what your perception of God is. I don't know what your image is. And a lot of times when we talk about God, we kind of get this image. And a lot of times, anybody have the gray-haired God sitting up on a throne image? Anybody, that's your image, where it's like you picture God and you picture he's got this long gray hair because he's kind of hippie-ish going on, right? So he's got the beard, really white beard, he's really wise, very regal, and he sits on this throne, he just kind of hangs out, right? And so we have this image of God that tends to I think, make him smaller than he is. And we can make him a big guy. I mean, he's a giant, right? He's monstrous, he's huge. Man, he's much bigger than you think he is. He is so much larger than we can imagine that he is. He is an enormous God, one who speaks and universes are created, one who articulates the words of life into all of the celestial beings, who knows billions and billions and billions of stars by name. He is a big, big God, and he sets this universe forth to declare the wonders and the glories of who he is, so that every single time we go out to the night sky, we don't go, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." And we make this wish on this star, but so that we would go out into the night sky all around the world, no matter who we are, no matter where we are, that we'd be able to go outside and we'd be able to see that there's someone, something much larger than ourselves. We are not alone. But it's not some little green guy hanging out there in Mars somewhere. We are not alone because we have an awesome creator, an enormous God who creates universes. Now, if we got that kind of a God, that big of a God, how big are your problems really? There's nothing that he cannot do. And so we walk with him in confidence. So, just application real quickly. What do we do with this enormous God? What do we do with this enormous God? Number one, we recognize that God is big. we recognize that God is big. He's huge. He fills this universe with his presence. And the God who is intimate with each one of us is also aware of the expanse of the entire universe that we live in. God is big, much bigger than you could possibly think or fathom or imagine. There's no way that you can expand your understanding and knowledge of how big he is. He is bigger than you think. Number two, we recognize that we are small, that we are tiny, that we are wee little bitty creatures. I mean, if you think about it, when you look at the vastness of space, when you look at the size of the earth, when you look at the size of the continent, when you look at the size of Texas, for crying out loud, when you look at even the size of this room, we really are small compared. But when you start getting bigger and bigger and getting a bigger idea and view and image of who God is, all of a sudden we become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and that is a good thing, by the way. Because whenever we realize how big God is, we realize how small we are, we begin to wonder even more about why would this big, enormous, amazing God want to have anything to do with small, tiny creatures like us. And yet he loves us. And he longs for us to know him. And he invites us into himself. He is so big and we are so small. And so number three, we yield our lives to the one who made us. We yield our lives to the one who made us. Why is this verse so big? Because we have a big God. What's he going to do with all that space? I don't know. I can't figure out what to do with the space in my own garage. But he's got it figured out. He's going to do something. In the meantime, he's big and I'm small, and so I yield my life to him.